us that it is always possible. Despite chaos and turmoil and exile, your life has been a beacon of fulfillment, serenity, and inspiration. In honor of your visit, we would like to present you with a commemorative plaque, and the text reads as follows: To His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Tenzin Gyatso, for his pioneering and tireless efforts in cultivating compassion and wisdom in healthcare and medical science. Your Holiness, on behalf of Harvard Medical School and the Cambridge Health Alliance and its Department of Psychiatry, we thank you for gracing this conference. May we all have peace in our hearts and the courage to live our values as Your Holiness has done. You are an example for us all. Thank you.
Give to His Holiness.
Thank you.
Your Holiness, I'd like to introduce to you the other panel members who are up here. You certainly know your interpreter, Dr. Thupten Jinpa, who is the principal English translator for the Dalai Lama and a leading Tibetan scholar. You are also no stranger to Dr. Richard Davidson from the University of Wisconsin in Madison. He's a foremost scientist working on the neurobiology of compassion and empathy. Some of his seminal work involves research on the brain and how it relates to meditation, and Time magazine has named Dr. Davidson as one of the world's top 100 most influential people. I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Judith Jordan. She's one of the founders of the Stone Center, the Jean Baker Miller Training Center at Wellesley College, which has been on the forefront of the study of the psychology of women. She studied the process of empathy and the role of culture in treatment. Her work has recently focused on the shift in psychology from a focus on the separate self to a psychology of relational well-being. To my right is Dr. George Valiant. He's a senior psychiatrist and professor at Harvard Medical School. His award-winning work has focused on the meaning of compassion through his research on adult development and on the recovery process from addiction and mental illness. His recent research is on successful aging, and his most recent book is on spiritual evolution. And finally, I'd like to introduce to you my colleague, Dr. Christopher Germer. He's on the faculty of Harvard Medical School at the Cambridge Health Alliance, and he's a fellow course director of putting this together. And you have met him at Emory, and he came to Dharamsala to invite you to come. He's the author of a soon-to-be-published book, The Mindful Path to Self-Compassion, and he teaches nationally about mindfulness and psychotherapy and self-compassion. So what we thought we would have here is a discussion between you and some of these people, and I was going to invite Dr. Davidson to begin.
Thank you, Your Holiness. It's wonderful to be with you again on this occasion. As you know, Your Holiness, I'm a simple psychologist and neuroscientist, and I have been conducting research on the brain and emotion for many, many years. And since we have had the opportunity to interact when I first met you in 1992, we have been very vigorously pursuing research on the brain mechanisms that are associated with various kinds of meditation practice. One of the important observations that has come out of this work on the impact of meditation on the brain is that practice makes a difference in terms of the enduring quality of changes that we see in the brain as well as in the body. To give just two examples of that, In our work with long-term meditation practitioners, we have observed that the greater the number of hours of lifetime practice among our group of long-term practitioners, the greater the enhancement in a certain brain signal that we have found to be very prominent during compassion meditation. In this case, it's gamma oscillations from particular parts of the brain. And there's a very strong correlation between the number of hours of practice and the magnitude of change in this signal. In work that we have done with novice practitioners, beginners, who are instructed in John Kabat-Zinn's mindfulness-based stress reduction, we have found that the more minutes of practice that the participants engage in when they're learning, the greater the change in certain biological signals that are associated with health and with reductions in inflammation. Now, since we are in New England, in the Boston area, I was reflecting on this question of practice, and I came across a wonderful quote from Henry David Thoreau, who was a great American poet and contemplative, who wrote Walden. And I would just like to, it's very short, I would just like to read it. He said, as a single footstep will not make a path on earth, so a single thought will not make a pathway. So a single thought will not make a pathway in the mind. To make a deep physical path, we walk again and again. To make a deep mental path, we must think over and over the kinds of thoughts we wish to dominate our lives. And so, the question that I have for you, Your Holiness, and the issue about which I would very much like you to speak is the issue of practice and how it relates to psychotherapy, which is the topic of this meeting. In most Western countries today, many people believe that physical exercise is good for their health, and they engage in regular physical exercise several times a week. The traditional way of practicing psychotherapy is that a client will go to a therapist typically once per week for a relatively short period of time, and the work from our own lab and the quote from Thoreau suggests that to make changes in the mind takes more enduring practice. And so I wonder if you could comment.
Physical practice. Exercise.
So I wonder if you can just give us some suggestions for how we can better incorporate this element into Western ways of addressing therapy and how the issue of practice is relevant.
That's a difficult question for me. I think first let me study Western psychotherapist work. My knowledge about that is almost zero. So it's difficult to say. But one thing, of course, I think physical action, usually we call physical action as well as mental action, is both through familiarization, it goes stronger and stronger. And then, between physical action and mental action, physical action is based on the physicals, body, so there is limitation. Even get used long period, but there is limitation, there is limit. Whereas mental action is concerned, and physical action, I think two factors. One, the basis of that action is physical, so quite rough, and then there's limitation. Then also, by nature, physical action, if you not carry that sort of exercise certain period, then next time you need once more sort of new effort. Whereas now mental action is concerned, then firstly, its basis is mind itself, not solid. Then, and also, you see that basis, mind itself as a basis is a continuum. Of course, the physical also is the particles continuation right from the beginning. I don't know, but then you see there was those very subtle sort of particle. It's the subtle level, the particle level, continuously, and changing like that. But that tanyam su rapar chikchatavdi kortidwa gyunjen because of koyanchi chajanjidwa.
So although from the perspective of very kind of subtle level of matter, there is, like in the domain of mind, there's a continuum. But at a grosser level, a kind of the macroscopic level, the body has it imposes certain limits.
Now mind, now here, as you know, it is important to make distinction. The sensorial level, or certain mind, which based on organs, sensory organs. That's very much related with physical thing. Then we call mental level is not based on physical, but based on the continuity of previous mind. So that, firstly, more subtle, almost like simply subtle energy. And then secondly, it continues. Then by nature, a certain mental quality, through training, once you achieve, then even certain duration, sort of not familiarize that, if you achieve certain sort of level. Then no need the
new effort. New effort.
As soon as you remember that, completely, sort of full form come. So, 누가 셨어?
then 또 가다 남란 해야 돼. practice 해야 돼. 계속. 이렇게 combat 해야 돼.
So then basically, they, 가서 로콤베 제수 집을 주님이 집었을
In the Buddhist tradition, there is an understanding.
로콤베 제수 집을 땡리 주님이 집었어.
In the Buddhist tradition, there is understanding that the more you cultivate familiarity with a certain way of thinking or certain way of being, the more effortless and natural and habitual it becomes, and that is the way the mind works.
Then, within the mental thing, basically two categories. One, shiraburichi.
So within the mental domain, when we talk of cultivation, one can roughly identify two categories. So one can identify two main categories. One type of engagement with the object that is more cognitively oriented and can lead to greater sense of ascertainment and understanding. So these are in the Buddhist tradition understood as more cognitive states of mind. So when we talk about wisdom versus other factors, it's the wisdom that belongs to that category. So another category of kind of mental engagement belongs more to a class of what the Buddhist tradition identifies as more in the form of wish, aspiration, interest, and so on. So these types of mental states do not lead to greater ascertainment or cognition. So therefore, they are recognized to be not cognitively oriented. Of course, they do belong to cognitive events. Because they are all part of mental domain.
So that the Beijing never don't go because we combat deal with the combat day, so combat pedal job. Dumberity, that was comna. That delay is a Roria. Correct look around Wody, Mother in a tea, I shook them narrow, didn't Angela, double.
So if you compare between these two kind of primary types of mental engagement, those that belong to the more kind of aspirational, the wish element and interest, although in themselves they do not engage specifically with the object in a cognitive manner, but when you cultivate them, you do require the aspects of intelligence, aspects of understanding, to ground them and to enhance them.
That shirug, the shirug, kind of doggerlo. There's a idea, because combatant and dealer. Karakasore. Shirug digi, Kang Zindang Yuduchag, turn teller. Yang kumjitanda chick. Da de kumjit tembatsangi, te dogbe lotte kumbat rungshu to that chick. Pesi doesn't measures.
So, with relation to those categories of mental engagement that tends to be more cognitively oriented, which in Buddhist language we call belonging to the wisdom dimension, there the way to cultivate greater familiarity is to deepen one's understanding of the object, whatever it is that this mind is relating to, and the greater your understanding of that object, then the greater the familiarity becomes. But also sometimes the subjective element of that wisdom also naturally increases as you come to understand whatever it is relating to in a deeper way.
탄년 자리나 유대로 공부했다. 유전대로 공부했다. 얘네 유전대 공부했던 데잖아요. 시바칸으로 시바지 그 전대 예배 거네 전대 안에 가서 로데 진당 유도 전에 아니 유지 시바지 기준만도 그 세리 장고래요.
So therefore we speak of cultivating familiarity with the object of our understanding and cultivating the experience of the wisdom, the arising of the wisdom in us, in our mind itself. So even from this subjective, perspective, when we are talking about cultivating a certain kind of understanding like wisdom, it is only in relation to an understanding of something that we can increase that wisdom or understanding.
That result there. 어다 딘자로리아 조 참배 독 금미부터 가도다 강군지 때야 전지 참배 송거야지.
So in both of these cases, the role of what the Buddhist tradition calls the faculty of mindfulness and application of that plays a very crucial role.
단 릭질 그 참배 가도다 로티 강 유두시대야 다디 미지버지는 참배 송외관에 로티 샹도 무초치야 탑시 직세 다 탑시 직려야 로티 요직 다 셴벨룽스낸다 에너지스는다 티 뉴버축축 담배 타네 로티 유신 초디야 용도하지.
So since this involves both of these engagement involve maintaining certain degree of focus upon a chosen object of one's practice, there are two ways in which this is done. One is by applying the faculty of mindfulness so that the practitioner learns to guard himself or herself from wavering away from the chosen object of meditation. So that's one process. The other approach involves not so much deliberately applying the mindfulness. Of course, there needs to be a presence of mindfulness. But
beside
that, the focus is to really somehow deal with the energy of that mental state, because the understanding is that every mental...
Now here energy means there's certain, I think basically physical, sort of physical particle, but very subtle, formless, almost formless. Microscopic I don't think.
So the idea is that mental, what is happening here is there's a mental process going on, and the mental processes are accompanied by a process of energy activation, very subtle, but although it's understood to be physical, but in a very subtle sense. So the second type of practice involve somehow finding a way of reducing the fluctuating, energy, fluctuation in the subtle process of energy. And that way, the mind is able to stay focused on the chosen object.
So then, they understand the petty shikdua, lung law gangden, and energy set. The shiva the xiao mixes.
So in the Buddhist text, there's this relationship.
No, this is Tantrayana.
In Vajrayana text, this relationship between the cognitive process, the mental process, and the energy that accompanies it, are compared to this analogy of a blind person, who has feet legs, and then a person with.
We cannot see, but can move.
But another person who can see, but is crippled.
We cannot move, but can see. So these must combine.
go together. No?
So now here, in that level, physical exercise and breathing control, now related. So these are the, system, how it works, go like that. Huh?
Your Holiness, I wonder if you'd permit me to ask Dr. Germer to introduce himself and ask you a question.
Thank you.
Yes.
Your Holiness, my question is about compassion, and particularly about self-compassion.
Yes.
I'm a psychotherapist in full-time private practice, and I've been interested for about 20 years in the application of mindfulness in psychotherapy. And mindfulness has within it the qualities of acceptance and compassion. But it seems to me that the more we suffer, the more we need to intentionally bring kindness and compassion into the picture, into mindfulness. In other words, awareness is often just not enough, and we in particular need to bring compassion to ourselves. As a therapist, and I know that most of the people in the audience have, we have a lot of patients who have been suffering for a long time with intense emotional pain from depression, anxiety, childhood abuse, or they might be going through a crisis in their lives right now, such as the breakup of a marriage or the death of a loved one or serious illness. But what I've noticed is a strange phenomenon. That is, precisely at the time when we need to be kind to ourselves, when things go really wrong, we become our own worst enemy. People tend, at least in this culture, when things get really bad, to criticize themselves, to hide from others in shame, and get kind of absorbed in rumination about themselves and their problems. And so I'm wondering, Your Holiness, have you noticed that? And if so, what would you say to such a person or recommend?
The previous discussion, this many occasions I think involved.
This topic came up, the need for self-compassion.
So actually, although in order to develop genuine sense of concern of others' well-being, they firstly concern of self-well-being, one's own well-being must be there. So, if it is someone who hating oneself, and such person, I think very difficult to develop genuine sense of concern for other. But then here, I have the view, the very reason why you develop some kind of self-hatred. In deep inside, you see, you want perfect, and you fail that. So there's some kind of
Judgment.
hatred.
So some kind of judgment and then hatred based upon that.
So not normal, Richmond give chuna something. Come on, you can do something.
So His Holiness was saying that in his understanding, the kind of mechanism that one can see here is that although kind of on the conscious level, the mental state is that of a criticism and hatred towards oneself, but underlying that there must be some kind of expectation of something good for you, some kind of ideal for perfection. And when you see yourself failing, then you are being overly critical and being angry towards yourself, hateful towards yourself.
So any questions from you too?
Yeah, follow up. Your Holiness, it does seem, in light of what you had said before and what Richie was talking about, that there needs to be a certain level of practice, of repetition, mental repetition, in order to overcome the habits of criticizing oneself if we don't live up to our own expectations. I'm wondering, Your Holiness, if you could potentially lead us in a brief meditation that the therapists in this room could practice at home to cultivate compassion for themselves as well as for their patients.
말에 그 공부대에 계신 부착이 어려웠어. 그래서 단디나 테라피스트 망부 요랬어. 그래서 수수 구조 이런 메시나 냠면시에 가든 인지 수수를 제거다 아니야. 수수 될 제거지. 공부 냠면 뒤뒤지.
Now, the mental attitude. I think like even the sort of external matters we usually call semi-pembo.
We call inanimate objects, inanimate material objects.
Compare with our body, perhaps I think less sophisticated. But even then, if it is survival or healthy growing, there's not one element.
One factor. Not one factor.
One factor, but a lot of factors. And at a particular level, many things then go together more balanced way, then it grow well and remain well. So similarly, our mind, there are so many sort of elements, body element also involved, and then mind itself. There are so many elements. So now here, the basic mental attitude is healthy. Then some tragic situation here and there may not disturb much. Like immune system. If immune system is strong, then some virus come and may not disturb much. But your basic immune system weak, then even tiny virus immediately disturb your health. Similarly, mind also like that. A basic mental attitude, mental state is weak. Then some small tragedy really brings out the upset.
Yeah.
So now the real question is how to build the basic mental state.
Healthy state.
Or healthy state of mind. Now that, I think some of you may want just one single meditation and a simple one and 100% sort of positive result. That I think impossible. There are a lot of different sort of, I think whole our attitude, sorry. Whole our attitude. I think towards oneself, outlook towards oneself, towards suffering, towards even whole world. Many things involved. So I think as far as Buddhism is concerned, because of that, in order to transform our destructive emotion, one goal, but the meditation, so many thousands different meditation mentioned. Because our mind is so much complex. So just a single one meditation, I think difficult. Now here, on the basis of my own experience, I can say this is just one sort of type of meditation. Its effect is limited. So combine. Now, for example, meditate on impermanence. Meditate on, I think, I may tell one story. The other day also I mentioned one, you see, good scholar, one monk, great scholar, and many students. I think he, in daily, I think he teach at least, I think, 6-8 hours. Very good scholar. And quite well known. So one day, a few years ago, one day he came to see me, and as soon as he entered my room, my office, his face is a very sad face. Then I asked, what is wrong? Then he mentioned some kind of depression or something.
He was suffering from some form of depression.
And I asked, what was the cause? Then he mentioned, sometime back he meditated on impermanence. So that meditation brought that miserable experience. So then I told him, now meditation on impermanence, not just a mere impermanence, but you see the other side, some positive side. You have clear sort of conviction or feeling, the positiveness. Then impermanence reminds, that's a wonderful opportunity, a wonderful sort of potential wasting. Isn't it? So that kind of sort of meditation, you see, there are many elements, many viewpoints, right?
Many aspects now. Many aspects.
Migwa Mangujida.
So His Holiness reminded him that when you are, even though meditating on focusing on a single object of meditation like impermanence, you need to bring in many other dimensions as well. For example, in the Buddhist text, we speak of impermanence, the nature of suffering or dissatisfaction, no self, emptiness, and so on.
Now, here, I think, for example, Four Noble Truths, not only just the because of the suffering nature of two truths, but later two truths, joyfulness. So it's more balanced now. Seeing the possibility achieve permanent joyfulness and develop conviction that, then you feel, yes, now my sort of, in some extent, biological factor, attachment, anger, these come, but these are obstacles to achieve that wonderful goal. Then, you see, you develop enthusiasm, you see, to tackle, you see, these things. And here, in order to reduce intensity of attachment or self-grasping, because of the meditation on impermanence. So now here, you see many things you see involved, isn't it? So something like, in order to build immune system, healthy, strong immune system, you see, you need a variety of outlook or concept. Then that eventually develop very healthy
State of mind.
state of mind. Then you see some problems now about come from this side. Then you can take one particular sort of countermeasure like that. So then, so if we, I think even myself no sort of the complete abilities.
Complete ability. No. No, complete ability. No.
Even myself, say now, I think more than 60 years, I put some effort for practice, but still not adequate. So therefore, just a few explanation or simple way to transformation of your mind is impossible.
Thank you.
There's some other sort of company, they always say advertise. It's some simple thing or something effective, something very cheap. My advertising is just opposite. And difficult and complicated. But one thing I can tell you, I can assure to you, that no matter our the disturbances in our mind, can handle gradually. And person whose mental state at this moment difficult, but through training, without losing hope and self-confidence and willpower, you can overcome these difficulties. That's quite sure. One master stated, Uzu Devdas, Duje Sona Minevimbes, Lord Jar Mijinyamashian, Tasu Jewis.
So one Tibetan Buddhist master said that even though a particular endeavor, a meditation practice may seem impossible at this point, but since the nature of the conditioned phenomena is such that they are susceptible to change, so what may seem like impossible to achieve in 100 years may turn out to be actually something that becomes achievable and quite easy later on.
That is my own experience. This is some idea, some practice. My age, say I think 30s. Then at that time, now I think, although this is not right if you to mention one's own sort of experience, but I think in order to give you some encouragement, perhaps I think some reason is to mention. After I came, of course, although I start practice with keen interest about Shunya, about Bodhicitta, of course, now as I mentioned earlier, more than I think more than 60 years. More than 60 years. My age, around 13, 14, 15, I developed some interest. Before that, as I mentioned yesterday, no interest. When is it my lesson, the time for my lesson is to come, I feel something like now dark, because the whole world become dark like that. The next day, holiday, then I feel now tomorrow, I always think now tomorrow, no lesson, holiday. So then I feel, very sunny. Sunny, something like sunshine like that. So then I came India as a refugee, and I began to restudy those important texts. At my age, I think, 24, I came out. And then in 30s, some experience about some experience of feeling of the absence of independent existence, shunya. That really developed. That really bring conviction. There is possibility of cessation of suffering, because suffering, all suffering, is to come out of ignorance. So mainly here, ignorance, which because of that
So ignorance in relation to understanding the nature of reality, ultimate nature of reality.
So there's some feeling, some experience, some sense of the ultimate reality. Then that brings immense sort of conviction. That kind of ignorance can remove. So then, at that time, about infinite altruism, I feel very far. Of course, admiration there, but feel difficult, very far. Then, 40s, my age was the 40s, more meditate. Then somehow, eventually, it becomes something quite close, familiar. Right?
Intimate, something intimate.
Intimate. So
this is exactly what the master was saying, that something that may seem like impossible can become very close to you.
So that is the positive side. Now I'm advertising positive side. Yes, then?
Thank you. Your Holiness, may I?
Oh, yes.
Invite Dr. Jordan to speak with you?
I am deeply honored to be here today with you, Your Holiness. I'm a therapist, and I am particularly interested in the centrality of connection and empathy in people's lives, and also interested in the ways in which certain cultures pose challenges to that sense of connection.
Right.
Traditional Western cultures and I think psychologies actually posit that healthy human development is about getting more and more autonomy, separateness, a kind of stand on your own 2 feet mentality. And Einstein actually once referred to the delusion of separateness that exists in Western cultures.
rangote mo sta disho
Matisa Malia, Tata Michon, self independent Einstein, Tudor.
The field of neuroscience and a lot of Dr. Davidson's work is confirming actually that we are hardwired in the brain to connect with others, and also that there is enormous brain plasticity that we can alter in our lives. And a lot of that can be altered through our relationships and connections with others. I actually find profound hope and comfort in these discoveries. But we also know that social exclusion and isolation goes to the same center of the brain, the pain center in the brain, that physical pain goes to. So social exclusion and isolation is real pain, and there is real suffering throughout the world created by this isolation. And I think in therapy, a piece of what we do is try to reestablish
Yes.
We have data now that suggests we need to participate in relationships, not to get or to give, but actually participate in building relationships and mutual engagement and mutual empathy with others, and that this actually creates a deep sense of well-being. It doesn't have to be compassion for self versus compassion for others. They are together. I think you once said that if you want to make others happy, practice compassion. If you want to be happy, practice compassion. They're together. So the dilemma that I see and I would like you to address is that our biology and neurobiology, our very being, calls out for connection, while many of our Western cultures in particular urge us to build ever more bounded, competitive, me-first selves. So I'm wondering whether, given this climate in Western cultures, where we're so committed to building this separation, whether you think we face particular challenges in practicing and developing and supporting compassion, both at an individual and a collective level. I think we have a responsibility to enhance the compassion of the collective, not just the individual.
No. I don't think. I think firstly, some people usually make distinction west and east and feel some big differences. That I do not think that. Yes, the lifestyle, these things there are differences. But at mental level, I don't think there's much differences. Even sometimes some discussion with some people, the Buddha's teaching, Buddha came to more than 2,600 years ago. So that ancient teaching, whether suitable now 21st century or 20th century or 21st century. Then I have the view, lifestyle much change at the time of Buddha and today. And similarly, Eastern, Western, Southerner, Northerner, there's differences. And much, I think, what's today? And in fact, I think modernity, I think essentially much related with external matters, material matters. So, physical level, I think more or less, as you mentioned, I think same. And then emotional level, same. Mental level also same. Then these sort of, how should I say, some part of our mind, or within the mind, or within the emotion, destructive emotion, constructive emotion, neutral emotion. Neutral emotion is the within the emotion, some neutral? Can you say?
Mutuality.
Huh?
Neutral.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought the emotion means some strong feeling. So then either positive or negative, or destructive or constructive, no neutral. Emotions do this horse should be restored.
Yeah.
Any neutral me do. Give me. Anyway, now the mental level, I don't think any sort of demarcation between Eastern and Western. I don't think. And also today's humanity and 2000 years ago's humanity mental state, I think same. Then in the future, perhaps after 100,000 years or a few 100,000 years, when the brain shape change, then maybe emotional level, some change may happen. So because of the brain specialist, you see, they can predict. The apes now. Ape like sort of that. And today, how many millions passed? How many millions years?
It's passed from the ape.
From the ape.
The big change of brain.
Over many millions.
To a million. So that means in future, after 1 million, then maybe shape of our brain may change. So then some emotion may change. I don't know. Now here, the social habit, that I think, even within the West, I think people in big city and people in countryside, I think some differences. I found in India, people in big city and people in rural area, there's differences. Among Tibetan also. So that means the environment, you see, the influence of environment. And then also is a Tibetan, the Tibetan in early period, so as a refugee in 6 days and 7 days, hardly no crime. very peaceful. And cheating, money cheating, these kind of things, never. Or never, or no significance. Then gradually our Indian neighbors, sometimes they found, now new generation of Tibetan, and particularly Tibetan who come from Tibet, inside Tibet, sometimes they found little differences. So these are same Tibetan, basically same Buddhist, but the environment make differences. And also in our settlement, people more talk about money. So that also is a change their mental state. More calm, more
Restful. No.
more restful. When talking about money importance, then more
Anxious now.
more anxious, more stress, like that. So I always feel the poorer section of people, I think the destructive emotion may be comparatively maybe less. And the higher upper class, right?
Yeah.
Upper class, more influential, then maybe jealousy. I think the ordinary sort of poor people, there's hardly is not much sort of feeling of jealousy among themselves. And also, I think very good. I think the sense of community. Upper, including some scientists. No. I really love you. This scientist, very good, wonderful person. So since he's a very close friend, so sometimes I have bold enough to tease. So it's some name. My own practice is when more people praising me, then I always constantly remind myself of one great sort of practitioner in Tibet, I think 1,000 years ago. He expressed, when you become something respectful,
Object of reverence. Object of reverence.
You must feel yourself the lowest person. That's very important. Otherwise, you become arrogant. You become too much because of self-centered sort of thing. Then, even without notice, all these destructive emotions then become very active. So finally, self-destruction. So therefore, the more successful
You become now.
More successful,
You
become more the more the danger
vulnerable now.
to develop these destructive emotions, like that. So my answer, you see, basically not much differences.
Yeah.
The other day I mentioned my American friend. This is some their result out of their practice. It's quite remarkable. Such sort of experience, quite rare among Tibetan.
Level of realization. The level of realization is there.
So we Tibetans should feel as envy or jealousy. So materially, you're more advanced. Now spiritually also seems that they're more advanced. So I mean, the point is, you see, basically we are same human being.
Thank you. Your Holiness, if you permit me to ask Dr. Valent to speak with you.
Your Holiness, I, like Dr. Jordan, was enormously impressed by the wisdom of your advice. If you want happiness, practice compassion. If you want to bring happiness to others, practice compassion. But my dilemma is really in which of these should we focus on? How do we integrate them? In the profession of psychiatry, the negative emotions are what we're all taught to deal with: grief, sadness, emotional hunger, lust. And these emotions are all about me. And we try to teach our patients how to have compassion for themselves. In contrast, the world's great religions are uniform in paying attention to the positive emotions, especially love and compassion. And, of course, the negative emotions are all about time present and all about me. The positive emotions are all about the future and all about the other. In my daily work, my job is to pay attention to the negative emotions of my patients. In my writing, I find I'm much more interested not in writing self-help books, but in trying to help people.
Self-help. Self-help.
Self-help. Love and compassion are rather different in that if we were run over by a truck, we would not want our mother, who loves us dearly, to come by, because in her attachment, she would be unable to be fully empathic to our pain. We would much rather have the detached paramedic come by who could empathically allow us to be seen. What? Yeah. Yes. Psychotherapists focusing on negative emotions tend to scorn the religious who focus on positive emotions. My dilemma is, in the future, should we train our psychotherapists to pay more attention to the positive emotions of the world's great religions, or should we try to educate the world's great religions to pay more attention to negative emotions? Sure. 그래.
네버리 젠게 다 종종들이 대든 치고.
그래.
내가 지나면 추적을 lapse 되면야 상도적 장미지 대든 치고 그러지. 아니야. 상도들이 받아 네버쪽이 추적의 식을 lapse 되는 시간 지금 제출 그래서 난 마음 벌이야. 약간 그 거는 뭐로 상도되는 게 마음 벌이야. 맨 그룹은 제제 쌤 네버에서 당치기도 추적의 식을 로선 되게 수 냉국이나 난 최고적으로 추적의 식을 lapse 들이야. 맨 손에 되게 주체 파티지 근데도 추적이 장판 왜서 생각하는
I always make distinction within the compassion, two levels. One compassion, one level, I think we usually use the experience, or usually we got the sort of understanding. The meaning of compassion is, I think, the first level. That compassion, now you already heard many times, so please don't bother. Otherwise, you sit here.
I always love to hear it again.
Even yesterday also, I mentioned yesterday's
distinction.
Almost whenever in my public talk about the importance of compassion, I always make distinctions in these things. So that level of compassion, very much oriented action or attitude. That compassion also very much mixed with attachment. Now, towards one's own friend, because their attitude, their action to you, positive, helpful, so you develop sense of closeness feeling. And with that, bring sense of concern of their well-being. That biased only your sort of
loved ones.
Your loved one. That kind of love, compassion, very much goes with hatred towards other group of people, so-called enemy, whose action is negative to you. Then hatred, anger. Even your own loved one, so long their attitude nice, compassion. As soon as some slight change, hatred. So that kind of compassion, biased, and basically biological factor, is spontaneous, without training. These are there. But then second level of compassion. Now using reasons, training, the second level, now genuine sense of concern of well-being of other, regardless of their attitude towards you. Now, oriented being, or person, or sentient being, or person, just like myself. So now, for example, to oneself, sense of sort of concern, not develop on the basis I myself very kind to me. No. Just one. But I have the feeling of pains and pleasure. And by innate way,
by nature, no?
By nature, I have desire to achieve happiness, joyfulness, and do not want suffering. So that's just the basis of our right, my right, to achieve joyfulness, to overcome suffering. Now, this reason exactly can apply on other, regardless their attitude towards you, but their being, or sentient being, or human being, particularly human being, they also, so the same experience, pains and pleasure, and on that basis, same right to overcome pain. So that use the reason and develop sense of concern. Now that unbiased, that kind of sense of concern can extend towards your enemy. As far as their attitude is concerned, they are enemy. So you have to make preparation to fight, good fight. But as long as they are human being or sentient being, they also deserve our sense of concern. Clear? Now this not mixed with attachment. So actually, that kind of higher level of compassion, in order to develop that higher level of compassion based on detachment. Attachment makes biased. So detach. Then on new basis develop a sense of concern. Now that's genuine compassion. That kind of compassion only through training, through reasoning. So now here, that kind of compassion, how to develop that kind of compassion? I usually feel and also telling people 3 ways. Number one, according to theistic religion. Theistic religion, that means religion with the concept of God, creator. The God, creator, infinite love, compassion. So the more admiration, more faith towards that kind of creator. There is more willingness to follow, to follow his example, like that. So we can find very, very compassionate people among Christians and Islam and so on. We can find there are people, such wonderful people. That's one way. The second way is non-theistic now. That's like Buddhism. And also one ancient Indian, I usually call twin religion, that's Buddhism and Jainism. No idea of creator, but their concept is law of causality, cause, effect. And very much similar that of Darwin's evolution theory, cause, effect. And effect is a causing another effect, go like that way. Some change. Now our brain change, not take overnight, but gradually change. This flower, when I was young, some say flower, I love that flower, very, very good one. So I,
so making transplanting
like
branch.
rose, cut and put in soil, then grow. So too much impatience. So today I planted, then after 2 days, pick up. whether it's rude coming or not. So that's unrealistic sort of expectation. It takes its own time. No? Take weeks and months like that. So the work, the law of causality, gradually changing like that. But significant because of that, obvious change must take place. The momentary change
on the basis of
momentary change. So therefore, so therefore, that's one way develop compassion. Now I'm not going to detail. Then now the question is, we must take care, we must look seriously about well-being of 6 billion human beings. It is unfair to concern only religious believer. The other non-believer, non-religious people, they're also human beings. They're also part of our community. And I think, in fact, I think that maybe, I think, majority. So therefore, now we must find ways and means to reach message of compassion to these people. Now, if we carry a message of compassion on the basis of religious belief, then we cannot reach to these people. So there must be third one. Usually I call secular way to promote these values. And actually the compassion itself, as I mentioned earlier, from biological factor. So that's not come through religion, but by nature. So basically the compassion is universal value, not religious, not value which based on religious faith. So the compassion itself is universal value, secular value. So through secular way to promote that. So now to your patient, your question, I think you have to judge the patient. Religious believer, then use religious method. Non-believer, secular way, use secular method. This is the same message of love, compassion.
Thank you, Your Holiness. We need to change the group here, so I'm sorry to interrupt, but thank you so much.
Kinds of thoughts we wish to dominate our lives. And so the question that I have for you, Your Holiness, and the issue about which I would very much like you to speak is the issue of practice and how it relates to psychotherapy, which is the topic of this meeting. In most Western countries today, many people believe that physical exercise is good for their health, and they engage in regular physical exercise several times a week. The traditional way of practicing psychotherapy is that a client will go to a therapist typically once per week for a relatively short period of time, and the work from our own lab and the quote from Thoreau suggests that to make changes in the mind takes more enduring practice. And so I wonder if you can comment.
Physical practice. Exercise.
So I wonder if you can just give us some suggestions for how we can better incorporate this element into Western ways of addressing therapy and how the issue of practice is relevant.
That's a difficult question for me. I think first let me study Western psychotherapist work. My knowledge about that is almost zero. So it's difficult to say. But one thing, of course, I think physical action, usually we call physical action as well as mental action, is both sort of what's today.
In our work with long-term meditation practitioners, we have observed that the greater the number of hours of lifetime practice among our group of long-term practitioners, the greater the enhancement in a certain brain signal that we have found to be very prominent during compassion meditation. In this case, it's gamma oscillations from particular parts of the brain. And there's a very strong correlation between the number of hours of practice and the magnitude of change in this signal. In work that we have done with novice practitioners, beginners, who are instructed in Jon Kabat-Zinn's mindfulness-based stress reduction, we have found that the more minutes of practice that the participants engage in when they're learning, the greater the change in certain biological signals that are associated with health and with reductions in inflammation. Now, since we are in New England, in the Boston area, I was reflecting on this question of practice, and I came across a wonderful quote from Henry David Thoreau, who was a great American poet and contemplative, who wrote Walden. And I would just like to, it's very short, I would just like to read it. He said, as a single footstep will not make a path on earth, so a single thought will not make a pathway. So a single thought will not make a pathway in the mind. To make a deep physical path, we walk again and again. To make a deep mental path, we must think over and over the concept.
Through familiarization, it goes stronger and stronger. And then, between physical action and mental action, physical action is based on the physicals, body, so there is limitation. Even get use long period, but there is limitation, there is limit. Whereas mental action is concerned, and physical action, I think two factors. One, the basis of that action is physical, so quite rough, and then there's limitation. Then also, by nature, physical action, if you not carry that sort of exercise certain period, then next time you need once more sort of new effort. Whereas now mental action is concerned, firstly, its basis is mind itself, not solid. Then, and also, you see that basis, mind itself as a basis is a continuum. Of course, the physical also is the particles continuation right from the beginning. I don't know, but then you see they use those very subtle sort of particles.
That it is always possible. Despite chaos and turmoil and exile, your life has been a beacon of fulfillment, serenity, and inspiration. In honor of your visit, we would like to present you with a commemorative plaque, and the text reads as follows: To His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Tenzin Gyatso, for his pioneering and tireless efforts in cultivating compassion and wisdom in healthcare and medical science. Your Holiness, on behalf of Harvard Medical School and the Cambridge Health Alliance and its Department of Psychiatry, we thank you for gracing this conference. May we all have peace in our hearts and the courage to live our values as Your Holiness has done. You are an example for us all. Thank you.
Give to His Holiness.
Thank you.
Your Holiness, I'd like to introduce to you the other panel members who are up here. You certainly know your interpreter, Dr. Thupten Jinpa, who is the principal English translator for the Dalai Lama and a leading Tibetan scholar. You are also no stranger to Dr. Richard Davidson from the University of Wisconsin in Madison. He's a foremost scientist working on the neurobiology of compassion and empathy. Some of his seminal work involves research on the brain and how it relates to meditation, and Time magazine has named Dr. Davidson as one of the world's top 100 most influential people. I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Judith Jordan. She's one of the founders of the Stone Center, the Jean Baker Miller Training Center at Wellesley College, which has been on the forefront of the study of the psychology of women. She studied the process of empathy and the role of culture in treatment. Her work has recently focused on the shift in psychology from a focus on the separate self to a psychology of relational well-being. To my right is Dr. George Valiant. He's a senior psychiatrist and professor at Harvard Medical School. His award-winning work has focused on the meaning of compassion through his research on adult development and on the recovery process from addiction and mental illness. His recent research is on successful aging, and his most recent book is on spiritual evolution. And finally, I'd like to introduce to you my colleague, Dr. Christopher Germer. He's on the faculty of Harvard Medical School at the Cambridge Health Alliance, and he's a fellow course director of putting this together. And you have met him at Emory, and he came to Dharamsala to invite you to come. He's the author of a soon-to-be-published book, The Mindful Path to Self-Compassion, and he teaches nationally about mindfulness and psychotherapy and self-compassion. So what we thought we would have here is a discussion between you and some of these people, and I was going to invite Dr. Davidson to begin.
Thank you, Your Holiness. It's wonderful to be with you again on this occasion. As you know, Your Holiness, I'm a simple psychologist and neuroscientist, and I have been conducting research on the brain and emotion for many, many years. And since we have had the opportunity to interact when I first met you in 1992, we have been very vigorously pursuing research on the brain mechanisms that are associated with various kinds of meditation practice. One of the important observations that has come out of this work on the impact of meditation on the brain is that practice makes a difference in terms of the enduring quality of changes that we see in the brain as well as in the body. To give just two examples of that,